Hi everyone, Nubkeks here, and in today's video I want to give you my review for Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, which we finished just before the weekend. Yeah, we finished the last bit of content. We actually just started off with Heaven's Word today with a new expansion, but today's video is about looking back at A Realm Reborn, what it did well, what it didn't, and as is I think pretty much customary for me at this point, we'll go pretty in-depth here, pretty comprehensive, so yeah. These are my thoughts on the game. Let's go. But wait, before we get into that though, have you crushed the Ice Golem? Have you ascended the Doom Tower? I want to take a minute to talk to you about the sponsor of today's video, Raid Shadow Legends. Let me show you one of the biggest challenges you can face in the game. This is the clan boss on Ultra Nightmare difficulty. Extremely hard. He hits like an absolute truck. The team I've built here actually faces up against him by using some clever tactics around putting unkillable buffs, which lets us live through any hit at 1 hit point, and then cooldown reduction to get maximum uptime on that. Unfortunately, the clan boss will eventually smash through unkillable as well. We're going to need some help to take him down, so we actually have to work with our 30-player clan to take him down, working in coordination, each of us building our own teams and competing against each other as well. And there is an insane promotion going on right now. You may have heard of Ninja. He's one of the biggest streamers in the entire world, and he's actually worked with Raid, and his character is now available in-game. Everyone can get him, but he's only available until October 15th. And this month in August, with the power of Ninja to get you through that clan boss, there's a ton of new clan features coming in as well, like clan levels, a clan shop, and even quests that you can do together as a clan. So if you want to give Raid a go and also get a huge start, hit the link in the description down below or scan the QR code, which is on the screen. And if you do that, you'll get a free epic champion, Shinaru, who can strip enemy defenses and deliver massive hits. You'll also get 200,000 silver, an XP boost, an energy refill, and an ancient shard to summon another champion as well. Once you've clicked the link, you can find the rewards in-game here on the top right hand side of the screen in the inbox, and they'll be there for the next 30 days. So yeah, it really is that easy. Click the link in the description and maybe I'll end up fighting you in some clan wars. See you in game. So the first thing I want to talk about is the story, because I definitely feel like that's what sets Final Fantasy XIV apart from all the other MMOs. I've seen so many people give just rave reviews of the later expansions, that the story in those is simply incredible, not only for an MMO, but just for any game in general, right? That it can contend with any game in general, that the story in those is one of the best, just straight up Final Fantasy stories of all time. It's worth playing the game. And all of the hours and hours and hours of content and story in there, it's well worth playing that just purely for that story alone. If that was all that you ever did in the game, that you would more than get your time and your money's worth, which is really high praise. But A Realm Reborn is supposed to kind of suck in terms of the story. This is supposed to be the bit that's really tough to get through, that's just not great. Basically, they remade the entire game. That's why it's called A Realm Reborn. They destroyed the world and actually made it part of the lore, which is a really cool touch. That yeah, in the lore, they took the original game servers down and they remade the game. In the lore, Bahamut, the Primal, came, pretty much destroyed the world, and it's part of the story now. That was the Calamity, which is like 5 years ago or something in the story, and it's about the nations now sort of rebuilding after basically the world got erased, which is a really cool way of doing it. But because of that, you know, they had a ton of work to do. The budget was fairly small. Voice acting is limited, all that sort of stuff. However, going into it with those really low expectations, I was really expecting it to suck, and I was just kind of going through the story for the sake of getting to the better stuff. Despite that, I actually didn't think that the story sucked. I actually thought that it was a fine story. It was decent. It was solid. It was pretty okay. It wasn't mind-blowing. It wasn't like rave reviews, best story ever. Far from that, but it was pretty decent. You know, you start off as this sort of regular adventurer for a very short period of time, which is a little bit boring. It does drag a little bit, but it's fresh. It's new. You're seeing the world. It's a new game. Very quickly, you get into being, you know, the warrior of the light, right? You are the chosen one, as it were, who's going to save the world. And then you start getting into all of this big stuff. And I feel like it's sort of, they have the bucket list of of enemies or interesting creatures for you to encounter or fight. So you've got, the beast tribes, which are summoning primals, basically summoning these gods, and you have to go and you have to fight these gods and stop them from destroying the world. You've got the evil empire, and they're all warlike and trying to take over. You've got the creepy Asians. These are like the behind the scenes manipulating sorcerer sort of dudes. You've got backstabbing within the main factions, the good guys, but they're not really good guys. You've got all this stuff. It's like tick all the boxes for all your typical fantasy villains. But I don't know, something about it just comes together, and it is just enjoyable, and it's good fun. It definitely is good fun. The characters as well, they definitely grow on you. At the start I was thinking, man, some of these characters are like Minfilia, for example. I don't know. It took me a long time to warm to Minfilia. But these characters, I actually thought that they started off a bit bland, but they definitely grow on you. And especially in the second part of A Realm Reborn, right? Because you've got like the base game is the first chunk, A Realm Reborn. Then you get into the post game, which was sort of the patches on the story that was released after the game had actually come out, over the next couple of years as they were releasing these patches. And I felt like you can clearly see in those, the storytelling, it gets noticeably better, particularly towards the end of post A Realm Reborn content. There's way more voice acting, the cutscene quality improves. Everything just sort of gets better, gets more hype, and I have to say the expansion, it really ends on a bang. There's a great ending to it that it definitely feels like a worthy ending, a worthwhile payoff to everything that you've gone through up until that point. And that's what you want out of an ending, right? You want to get to the end of that journey and feel like, yeah, that was awesome. That brought it all together. And I just left super hyped up and just so ready to move into Heavensward. So yeah. Considering that I was told the story sucks, I actually thought that considering that, it actually did pretty well. But obviously, certainly for the first chunk, don't expect to be wowed. It is certainly also worth mentioning, I think the biggest criticism just in general that I have with the game is it does have serious pacing issues. Now, this has been improved. Recently, they cut out a lot of the fluff quests, a lot of the boring, mundane, menial side quests, or even main quests that were in A Realm Reborn. They cut out, I think, about 20 or 30% of it, apparently. There's still quite a bit of fluff in there, so that is an issue. In particular, I thought that the post A Realm Reborn stuff, even though the story is really good and the quests and the dungeons and the raids and all of that is actually really entertaining and really cool, and your class is obviously much more fleshed out at that point, but it does have a pacing issue where you hit that level 50 mark, which is where you would ordinarily have moved into Heavensward. But because it was all content at the end of the expansion, there's a ton of content, a ton of story for you to get through, where you're basically not earning any experience. You're not really getting any item upgrades. So you're just going through all this like end game content, but you still know that you've got multiple expansions of leveling ahead of you. So that can be, I found that a bit frustrating, that even though the content is really good, that felt like it just kind of went on and on and on. It was like this sort of endless content of post Realm Reborn stuff. So, I mean, again, it's just a matter of framing it, really, that if they were able to rejig it so that you would keep earning experience and maybe start post A Realm Reborn at like level 35 or something and end it then at 50, or it might feel a bit more rewarding, but that's obviously difficult to do. But it's definitely something to watch out for. You got a lot of stuff to get through, and it can feel like you're just sort of stood still going through that stuff. So watch out for that. The second thing I want to talk about then is combat, which is probably the biggest thing that was the most pleasant surprise, because I'd sort of gone into this expecting that it really wouldn't hold a candle to WoW's combat. I sort of had that impression that, this was a really easy game, and that there wouldn't be too much complexity in it. And that's definitely a misconception. 100% it is, I have to say. There's a few things this game does really well in combat that I thought I found really cool so far and really enjoyed. I've mostly played melee DPS, I will point that out. So I've got Dragoon, Monk, and Monk. Sorry, Dragoon, Monk, and Monk. Dragoon, Monk, and Samurai are all now in the mid-50s for me. So still a long way off level cap, and there's still a lot of complexity to those classes that I have not got into. but it still gives me a pretty good feel for the core of what's going on with melee combat. So a few things that I thought were really cool and add a lot to it. Positional attacks is one of them. So and Monk has a ton of these in particular, where if you attack a target from the rear or from the flanks, so from the sides, your abilities will do extra effects. So typically something along the lines of, like 10% extra damage or something like that. So it's the sort of thing that you can ignore if you have to for mechanics, but so long as you can pull off these positionals, you kind of really should. But that adds a whole ton to the gameplay, right? Because you're constantly moving, because you could have one attack be on the flank, and then the next attack in your combo might be from the rear. So you're constantly moving around the enemy. Not only are you considering just the movement for the encounter itself and like the attacks that the enemy is doing and where you need to be positioned for the fight itself, but just irrespective of that, you're also balancing that against your own movement, right? And where you want to be to get the maximum out of your rotation. So I found that to be super fun and engaging. And that's obviously something that's pretty much unique to the melee DPS, that the casters obviously don't deal with that at all. But I thought that was super good. Another thing that's really cool, that was a bit concerning to me at the start, was that the GCD is very slow. I think it's a 2.5 second GCD compared to WoW, where it's a 1.5 second GCD. So thinking, man, you're pressing a lot less buttons. It's going to be a lot slower, a lot less intense. The thing is, though, certainly with the Monk is a whole bunch of passives that make it faster. So the Monk actually does feel really fast, especially because you do have to move for those positionals. It's actually very, very chaotic, very intense. But then you've got other classes, other jobs, where you actually have a lot of off global cooldown abilities. So on my Dragoon, this is really obvious. My Dragoon, I've got my core rotation, my combos, which are on GCD, but then between those GCDs, I'm weaving in these off GCD attacks, these jump attacks, which just gives this super satisfying sense of gameplay, and you can sort of plan around it. And again, it's like the idea of not just spinning one plate, but you've got two spinning plates that you're thinking about, your core GCD combos, and then weaving in your OGCDs in between those as well, which actually does up the speed of combat a lot, which is something I hadn't expected. I know people gave out a lot about, in World of Warcraft, them removing a lot of off global cooldown stuff, and I didn't really understand it at the time. And funny enough, coming in playing Final Fantasy is when I start to really appreciate sort of the depth and the fun factor of those off global cooldown abilities. And then another thing they do that's really cool is that they have combos. So yeah, for example, on my Dragoon, it's actually a 5-step combo, although I haven't unlocked a couple of those steps quite yet. But the idea is that you start with like your basic thrust attack, and when you do that, it's going to empower the second move. It's going to empower like your Vorpal thrust attack, which is the second move in your combo, and then that's going to empower the third move in your combo. So you're sort of going through like 1, 2, 3. A lot of classes have these 1, 2, 3 combos. Now with Dragoon, they actually have 2 different 5-step combos. So you're sort of alternating between your 5-step combos and weaving stuff in on top of your cooldowns, on top of your OGCDs. And yeah, honestly, I found the combat, once you're about level 50, to be actually really satisfying. It starts to get really good there, and there's a ton of complexity in those jobs. Some of the jobs seem pretty simple, some of them seem very complex, but yeah, it's actually really enjoyable, and it's been a super strong highlight for me. Again, the downside here, I have to say, is that jobs up to level 30 are pretty terrible. They're really quite boring. Once you get to level 30, it's where you unlock sort of your real job for a lot of all of the starting classes. So for example, with my Monk, you start as a pugilist, which is just, you like punching stuff, and has its whole story about punching stuff up to level 30. At level 30, you become a Monk, which is still about you like punching stuff, but it's also about harnessing the sort of inner power, these chakra, and channeling this ether to sort of give you these sort of pseudo magical effects, right? So that's a whole other story. It's a whole new job, and you unlock a whole slew of new abilities and things like that at 30. So that's where things start to get good. They're still pretty terrible though. It's around about level 50 that, for again the 3 jobs I've played, that you start to feel like, okay, the basics, the core of my kit is actually here. I actually have combos or OGCDs, a couple of cooldowns. Stuff is actually coming together For some aspects, that's still not quite true. So for Dragoon, for example, your AoE combos unlock really slowly. They come way later. For Monk, it's also very slow to unlock like your class gauges or these secondary resources to manage. They come again later. So there is still stuff like that that still comes later on. But the sort of the core of the classes seem to me, the core of the jobs, start to play pretty decently around level 50 and then obviously get better from there. It's also worth mentioning that there's very little customizability to the jobs, but to me that hasn't bothered me at all. So for example, in World of Warcraft, you've got, your talent trees and your legendary choices and blah, blah, blah. You got all these ways to customize your character and make you different to others. Oftentimes what that boils down to, realistically though, is very cookie cutter stuff. It's look up a guide in terms of what is the best, and then you play it like that and blah, blah, blah. The customizability, I don't know how much it actually adds. In Final Fantasy XIV, from everything I've seen so far, it's just a Dragoon is a Dragoon. And yeah, you can customize your stats a bit and it might change some of your gameplay around a little bit. But for the most part, that really has very little impact from what I've seen so far. Certainly in a Realm Reborn, it has literally zero impact. A Dragoon is a Dragoon. A Monk is a Monk. Plain and simple. That's it. And that's actually really good. The balance is way better. You can play whatever you want. It's going to work. It's much easier for the developers to balance. And yeah, I just find like there's really good variety in the jobs. And the best thing, I almost didn't mention this. The best thing is that you can play every job on their one character, right? Like in World of Warcraft, I can play a mage. If I want to go tank on a warrior, I have to start a whole new character, level them up. All the reputations do it again. All the quests do them again. Whatever, right? It's starting from complete scratch. In Final Fantasy XIV, you're playing through the game on your one character. And then if you want to switch jobs, you just go and you do the quest to unlock the job, and then you can switch over. Simple as that. And you just have the gear sets. You swap your gear set. It swaps your class automatically. And bam, I press a button on my monk. I press a button. I switch over to my samurai. It's as simple as that, right? You can't do it obviously in combat or in raids or whatever, but in a city, no problem. Just out in the world, no problem. Switch whenever you want. You can have every single job, every single crafting skill, every single combat job. You can have them all. Of course, you have to level them up each individually, but you get really nice XP bonuses to do it. It's just really friendly to trying and going and doing those other jobs, which is phenomenal. And again, you play through the story once, going back to part of why the story is good. It's designed to be a really good story that you play through once, you have an awesome time, and then there's a whole bunch of bonus XP and like leveling roulettes, like just random dungeons and stuff like that. There's a whole bunch of ways to level up your alternate jobs that are fun and quick, relatively quick. But yeah, just your main story is that once-off thing that you do on your character, and you just have one great experience, and it's super long and super good, and yeah, it works really well. The third thing I want to talk about is just the side content, which is exceptional in this game. I mean, arguably, it's not even side content. It could be your main content. It's that good. Crafting and gathering, probably the best example of this. Because you can have every crafting and every gathering job all in the one character, and these can all work together, So like you can go and gather a whole bunch of plant resources on your botanist, and then you go and you weave that up into cloth as a weaver, and then you're going to use that cloth as part of your leather working products on your leather worker. All of these skills working together is really interesting. Even more interesting though is that you've got a rotation. You've got a whole completely comparable to a combat job. You've got this entire crafting system. You have your rotation, you're managing your resources, you have all these abilities that unlock as you level up those crafting jobs, which is just super fun to me. Like, I've really enjoyed that. It's just incredible. People play this game as omni crafters, where all they do is craft. They just have all the crafting jobs. It's the main thing they do. And I can see why, because it's just super, super fun. On top of that, housing is something I haven't got into, and you likely won't during the course of you playing a Realm Reborn either. You simply won't have enough money to do so. But there's a whole housing system where you can easily enough get an apartment and decorate your apartment and have your own room. You just collect all the decorations and customize it the way you want to. Or you can have a house for your free company, which is the equivalent of a guild from World of Warcraft, where you and your friends can each have your room in the free company. You got your shared spaces, which you can customize together, all that sort of stuff, which is really cool. I haven't really gotten into any of that, but just knowing it's there is just something that's super exciting to me. I've certainly gone and visited all the housing areas I've seen so far, and they've been some of the highlights of my time there, just going around and seeing what players have actually created. Fishing is super fun. I love my ocean fishing. It's a fishing raid. You go in with like 24 other people and you're working together to catch as much fish as you can. Just a super fun and chill way to spend some time. It's awesome. Yeah, that is just so good. Or then you've got the Golden Saucer, where there's a whole bunch of mini games. Triple Triad, there's a card game in the game, kind of like Gwent in The Witcher 3. It's really on the same level of that. It's really, really enjoyable, really good. There's Chocobo Racing. There's just a bunch of mini games constantly happening there. Plus, there's these events that keep popping up in game as well that have been really good quality. Like there was a murder investigation in the Gold Saucer in the casino that I had to go and do, and that was a quest, and that was really cool. There's another event, I think, starting next week, which is supposed to be also super exciting, the summer event. So there's a whole bunch of stuff like that that's constantly going on. That's actually really engaging. That's worth your time, and it's worth checking out. A whole bunch of reps with beast tribes and stuff like that too. So yeah, it just feels like there's tons of side content there that you can just go dip your toes into straight away. And then the final thing I want to touch on is the world, which sort of brings a lot of these other things together. But there's just something special about going in an MMO, going to any of the capital cities, and you walk through that capital city and they're just thronged with people. There's people in their crazy glamours, their crazy armor, their crazy getup, just going around looking like they're crazy. There's tons of people crafting. There's bards on the side of the street just doing concerts. I've seen several concerts where there's groups of like 6 or 7 bards all playing these really elaborate pieces together, like movie themes and game themes. Like the Sephiroth theme was one example I heard the other week. Really fun, and like just crowds just form around them to listen in. It's just super badass. You go out in the zones and there's people out there doing the world quest, doing the fates, right? They're engaging in this content together. The community is just really friendly, welcoming. They love their game. And yeah, it's just that sense that you're in this world with other people, that it's full of people and they're all having a great time. There's tons of stuff to do together. That is probably the biggest and best thing about this game. It probably is the best thing out of a lot of good things about this game. And there you go. That's sort of my general thoughts. Obviously, as you can see, mostly extremely positive about Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn. I went in with a very open mind. I went in with relatively few expectations, I think. And in fact, actually, probably some, fairly skeptical expectations. I'd heard the story wasn't very good, so I expected it not to be good. And for the most part, I've just been continually impressed by the game. Just continually impressed, continually blown away by the love and the care that has gone into this game, and just how fun and enjoyable and deep the content is, and how much of the content it is, from story to side content to just how enjoyable the different jobs are and how different they are. I've sank a couple of hundred, maybe 300 hours in already over the first month or so, maybe 2 months now. I've kind of lost track, but it's just phenomenal. I often struggle, to be honest, with streaming, with making content. I find it very difficult to motivate myself, but pretty much, I take the weekends off, right, from streaming most of the time. But when it comes to Monday, in the past, I would always be struggling to actually do something. It's just really hard to actually get back into it, even after a day or two break. With this game, though, I'm just like, when can I next stream it? I'm looking forward to it. I'm playing it off stream as well, getting stuff done, grinding out my squadron ranks, working on some alt, like crafting jobs, that sort of stuff. I'm doing all that off stream and having a great time as well. Any excuse to get on, I'm jumping at it, it's high praise. So yeah, this game is incredible. It's extremely worth your time. It's well worth checking out. Literally everything most of the stuff I've done so far has been completely free. You could do it all in the free trial. You could do the whole Realm Reborn game plus Heaven's Word for free on the free trial. Now, there's some stuff I did, like Samurai, for example. That's obviously locked because that's a later expansion job, so you have to actually buy the later expansions to actually get access to that. And some of the crafting stuff was much easier with access to the market board and the ability to trade and buy off of other players. So that stuff is limited, but you can you can get hundreds of hours out of this game just on the free trial alone. So, you know, is it worth it? Yeah, obviously. Obviously. There you go. They're my thoughts on Final Fantasy XIV. Let me know what you think, especially if you're a new player like me. You know, if you were someone that had only played WoW and you kind of dismissed Final Fantasy XIV, you're like, I don't really need it. I've got WoW. I'm fine. But I've now come and giving it a go and discovered this game, which is years and years of awesome content. What are your thoughts so far? I'd be curious to hear. Thank you for watching, everyone, as well. I might catch you on my stream. Might catch you for more videos. I will see you all soon, though. Bye-bye.